Hi and welcome to Made by E. Today I'm going to show you how to create this messenger bag. I love how unique this bag looks and how functional it is. This is what the front looks like and this is what the back looks like. As you can see, the back has two pockets. The flap is covered by some pieces of a suit, and as you can see here, there is a clasp closure. I used a cute piece of customized fabric for the interior flap, so you get a peek of that when you open the bag. There's a zipper so that nothing will fall out, and then there's also an interior zipper on the back and a divider piece which acts as a zipper and a pocket, and the front also has two interior pockets as well. This bag was inspired from a Korean show called Mapo멋쟁이, which means Mapo Hipster. There was a guest named Kang Seung Yoon from K-pop's band Winner who was wearing a messenger bag that a fan gave to him. So that's where I got the idea from. First, I'm going to go over some of the materials that I used for this bag. I used a secondhand suit, some black canvas, a piece of customized canvas, white cotton, and white canvas. Depending on how large or small you want to create your bag to be, you may need more or less fabric. I also used 2-inch webbing, 1-inch webbing, some rectangle rings, a tri-glide slider, some Chicago screws, and a purse clasp. I also want to point out that if you do use a different webbing width, just make sure that you correspond that with the rectangle rings and the tri-glide slider so that they'll fit within that webbing size. I also used a 16-inch white zipper, a 16-inch black zipper, and a 12-inch black zipper. Two zippers that I'm going to use for internal pockets are a little bit thinner. The one that I'm going to use for the external zipper is a little bit more of a heavy-duty kind. And then I also do have this personalized tag. I just think this is like a really cute touch if you're making your own bag, but it is optional. And then for creating my bag, I used a few different rulers, a leather hole puncher, some marking tools, fabric glue, some sewing clips and sewing pins, a lighter, and some scissors. The first thing I'm going to do is create my templates. I just have some leftover architecture paper laying around that I can use. If you don't have a large sheet of paper, you can always just tape some together for your template. I'm going to be using my rulers, scissor, pen, and a bowl with a rounded corner. This is just for the bottom of the bag. If you don't have a bowl like this, you can use anything that has a rounded corner to help create your template. I started by measuring out an 11 by 15 piece rectangle. Then I used my bowl to help outline the rounded corners. I cut out the rectangle first and then folded it in half to cut the rounded corners to ensure that they would be as symmetrical as possible. Then I measured and cut out a 6.5 by 9.5 piece rectangle and a 3 3/4 by 39-inch piece as well. I'm just going to go over all three of my templates, and all of the measurements are down below in the description. But I have this template for the front, back, and the front flap. I'm also going to fold along this edge here for the back pocket template and also the interior divider template as well. This is going to be used for my inner pocket, and the last one is going to be for my gusset. The gusset I actually made a couple of inches longer than it needs to be, and I'll show you why later. It's just one of those like measure twice, cut once sort of scenarios. Better safe than sorry. And then I just made some notes on each template so I could keep track of what to cut and how many pieces to cut. There's going to be some other small pieces as well, but I didn't create templates for those since they're going to be pretty easy to cut. Most of them will just be rectangles and squares. Again, all of the measurements are going to be below in the description, and you'll see what I'm talking about later when I go over the fabrics. For my normal canvas fabric and cotton fabric, I just used the templates and used a disappearing ink pen and a piece of chalk to outline and cut them out. For darker fabric, I use chalk, and then for the lighter fabric, I use the disappearing ink pen just to make it easier for me to see the outline of the templates. For my gusset, the one that's going to be on the inside, I did cut it a little bit wider since I'm going to be cutting it in half. I just used my meter stick to add about 1 inch to the long side. For my customized fabric, I made sure to put the rounded corners on the top of the pattern. I wanted the dogs to be right side up when I opened the flap. If you do have various patterns on your fabric, just be aware of the orientation and which way you want them to face when you're cutting out your fabrics. I'm so sad. I realized that my video wasn't filming, but that's okay. You didn't miss much. I'm just gonna do a quick recap before I continue. So I cut off both arms on the suit jacket and this rectangle piece on the front. These are the 3 pieces that I wanted to go over my front flap. I also cut out my gusset. I realized that whoever I bought this suit from wasn't overly tall, so the pant leg didn't quite reach 39 inches. What I ended up doing was I ended up folding my gusset template in half and then cutting the front and back of the leg together, and then I'll just sew those 2 pieces together. Whew, okay, you're all caught up now. So right now I'm trying to figure out the best way to cut the fabric on the suit. Since the suit has pieces that were already sewn together, I have to figure out the best way to puzzle my template together. I started with the back pocket first and cut out the fabric from the back of the jacket. And then for the front and back pieces of the bag, I ended up cutting a top and bottom for each of them, and I'll just be sewing them together, since there wasn't a single piece that was large enough for me to cut those templates out from. So these are the 3 templates that I need to sew: the front, the back, and the gusset. I'm gonna go ahead and sew them together and then press everything with an iron before I go over all of my pieces. I finally have everything cut out. Here is my exterior gusset, my interior gusset, and the 2 pieces are going to be sewn together with the interior zipper divider. And these are the strap covers that are going to be sewn onto the exterior gusset and my interior zipper divider. And this is where the zipper will be sewn. Here I have the front flap, the pieces for the back and front of the bag, and you'll see here this is where I sewed the 2 pieces together. The interior zipper pockets, interior pocket, and back exterior pocket. And I should note here that I actually ended up not using the clasp cover, so if you want to go ahead and omit that, you totally can. I also forgot about the interior white zipper tabs, so you'll need 2 small pieces made with the white canvas that are 3 inch by 1.5 inches. And lastly, I have the flap accessory pieces. I haven't cut out the top yet, just because I want to be able to play around with the layout before I commit to anything. You'll see me doing that later in the video. And these are the zipper closures and the zipper ends. I also do want to point out that you can customize your own messenger bag however you want. You can make the depth wider by widening out your gusset. You can make the bag longer, shorter, really whatever you want by adjusting the template. So I'm gonna go ahead and create my flap first. I'm gonna put the right sides together. Obviously for the black canvas, it doesn't really matter, but for the white patterned fabric, I do need to make sure that it's flipped around. I'm just going to go ahead and line it up as best as I can and just clip all the way around the edges so that everything's anchored together. And I'm just going to go ahead and sew along the edge here at 3/8 of a seam allowance. Make sure that you don't sew the top shut, since this is where you're going to be flipping your flap inside out. And just make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and end of your stitches. Now that I have everything sewn, I'm going to turn the flap inside out. But before I do that, I'm just gonna make some small cuts around the curved edges, just to help make the curve look a little bit smoother when I do turn it inside out. You want to be very careful with this part. Make sure that you're not getting too close to the stitching. I've definitely played too close to the fire and cut through my stitching, and that was a whole new thing that I had to fix before moving on. So just be really, really careful. When you're flipping your flap inside out, just be patient. You really have to get in there and tug around the corners to get that rounded shape. And oh my gosh, look how stinking cute that is. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and press down the edges. I wanna make sure that when the bag is flipped and closed, none of the white fabric is showing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and clip around the edges with a tiny bit of the black overlapping along the white. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and sew along the edge here and do a top stitch and just keep that top part open. Oh my gosh, I cannot get over how cute this is. So all I did was stitch along the 3 edges here, and I made sure to leave the top open. And now when I open up my bag, you'll be able to see my pups, and again, they'll be right side up since I made sure to cut the rounded corners on the top here. I'm going to now work on the back piece of my bag. This is the pocket, and I'm going to be sewing along the center so that I have 2 pockets. I'm going to sew the canvas into the pocket to act as a lining piece. So all I'm going to do is place the canvas about 1/4 of an inch down from the exterior fabric with the wrong sides together. And as you can see, my fabric already has a bit folded over, but I'm just gonna fold it over one more time and then sew across the fabric here. I'm just gonna clip everything in place first, and then I'll sew across here on my machine. All right, so here is my pocket that I just sewed. You can see that I just stitched this top here, and this is what the back looks like. And you can see that the piece is just held together by just that one sewing line there. I'm gonna go ahead and assemble the back. So I'm gonna take this exterior back piece, and then I'm just gonna lay the pocket right on top. And something that I really like, that I really didn't do intentionally, is that this part that I sewed together is actually hidden by this pocket. So super exciting there. I just love it when things like that happen. But I'm gonna go ahead and clip everything together so it'll stay secure while I sew my pockets. So I'm gonna go ahead and just sew down the middle here because I just wanna have 2 large pockets. If you wanna have like a small pocket and a big pocket, or you wanna have 3 pockets, you can just go ahead and sew as many lines wherever you want along this bag. All right, and I'm just gonna go to my machine and I'm just gonna sew down this line here, and I'll come back up just to make sure that all 3 pieces are anchored together really well. All right, I've finished sewing down this middle here, so you can see that my pocket and inner lining are now attached to this exterior piece. And I'm going to now add a strap here. This is 8.5 inches long. I wouldn't recommend going any shorter than this, but if you do want to make your handle longer, you can definitely do that. I'm just gonna go ahead and seal my webbing with a lighter. And random question, but does anyone else's culture have weird myths around fire? In Korean culture, they actually tell kids that if you play with fire during the day, you'll wet the bed at night. This was probably just created to deter kids from playing with fire, but it did scare me when I was growing up. Anyways, back to the DIY stuff. And I just want to find the center point here first. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this line as a guide since it was pretty centered. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a chalk line here. And I want the handle to be about 3.5 inches apart from the ends. So just gonna go ahead and take my ruler and measure out 1 3/4 inches on each side. I'm gonna go ahead and go 1/2 inch over the top of the fabric. It'll help secure the strap, and I'm just gonna go ahead and clip these down. And just be careful that you don't accidentally twist this strap, but you're just gonna follow this guideline and go like this. And so now you're just gonna sew along these lines here. I typically just take like a pin and just pin this middle part in place here, just so it doesn't accidentally move up and you end up sewing something else. All right, so this is my handle. So it's just gonna look like this when the bag is finished. I'm gonna go ahead and set this aside and work on the front exterior now. And the only thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and add my little tag here. If you have a tag, a personal tag, it's just a really cute personal touch just to add one here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hand stitch this on. So I'm just gonna find the center by folding this in half first. I'll just go ahead and mark this with a chalk. Perfect. And I think I'm just gonna go ahead and put my tag right here. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of fabric glue right in the middle of that so it stays secure first. And I'm just gonna take a needle and thread and just sew through the stitching. I got these personalized tags on Etsy. The seller was probably one of the best sellers I've ever bought from. Super accommodating and responded to all of my questions really quickly. The Etsy store link is in my bio if you want to order your own personal tags as well. Now I'm gonna go ahead and sew these pieces here. These are gonna be the pieces that are gonna hold down the straps on the gusset. So all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna fold these in half and just clip them in. And I'm just gonna sew along the edges here, and then once I'm done, I'll be able to just lay them flat here, and that's what they'll look like. So these are the two pieces that I just sewed together. I'm just gonna be using them on top of my gusset when I go ahead and put the straps on. I'm gonna go ahead and assemble my outer part of the bag now. The way that you could do it, which is probably a little bit easier, is to actually put the straps onto the gusset first and then go ahead and assemble it to the back and the front of the bag. I actually don't do it that way. No matter how many times I measure it or do the measurements and do the math, I just can't seem to get it symmetrical. So I'm just gonna go ahead and attach the gusset all the way up to about this point here. I'll go ahead and attach the straps so that they're even and symmetrical, and then I'll go ahead and finish sewing up. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I can do it on my method. I'm gonna go ahead and set the back portion aside, and I'll work with the front first. I'm just gonna go ahead and find the middle point. So I will just fold this fabric in half and just make a little chalk line here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and line up this center point with the middle of the gusset here. So I'm just gonna turn the gusset over so that the right sides are facing together. And I'll just go ahead and pin along to about this point here. All right, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and sew along this edge here, making sure that I avoid sewing this area here. Sewing the curved corners of this part is going to be a little bit difficult. Just make sure that you go slowly, and I would try to keep the front of the bag as straight as possible. It's okay if the gusset part overlaps a little bit, since that will be towards the bottom of the bag. So this is what my bag looks like now with part of the gusset sewn on. I'm just gonna go ahead and trim off the excess pieces now. All I did was flip the bag over and just make a note of where the front fabric ends. I just made a line and then trimmed off the excess gusset part. So now that my gusset is the actual length that I need it to be, I'm just gonna go ahead and sew in the straps and the rectangle rings. I'm going to cut the webbing down into 4-inch strips first, and then I'm just gonna use a lighter to seal the ends. In the middle of using my lighter, I actually ran out of lighter fluid. So I had to run and get a candle and finish sealing my ends with this birthday candle. But whatever works, right? And in order to make sure that my webbing was straight, I put them through the rectangle ring first and then just sewed them together. I also do want to note that I wanted the stripe to be towards the back of the bag, so if you do have any sort of pattern on your webbing, just make sure that they align with the direction that you want them to be on. So now that I have the 2 webbing straps that are sewn together into the rectangle ring, I'm just going to go ahead and line them up onto the gusset. I typically eyeball this part for now, and then I'll go ahead and use a ruler later to kind of make sure everything is centered. Kind of lay the piece that's going to cover the strap just to give me an idea of what it's going to look like on the gusset. And then once I figure out where I want everything to go, I'll just put a little bit of fabric glue and clip it in place until it dries. After the glue has dried, I'm just going to go ahead and lay the pieces on top of the webbing straps. I did press the pieces so that they lay a little bit more flat. I'm just going to make sure that these are clipped in place, and then I'm just going to do a straight stitch across the top and the bottom, and I'll do that for both sides of the gusset. Now that I have my rectangle rings assembled onto the gusset, I'm just going to go ahead and add some Chicago screws. You don't necessarily have to do this. I mean, the bag is already secure, but I do think that it adds a cute little design to the side of the bag. I basically measured out where I wanted my Chicago screws to sit. You can make them as close together or as far apart as you want. And then I used my leather hole puncher to punch in a hole and then screwed the Chicago screws in. You can also add a little drop of super glue before you screw it in if you want to, just to make sure that it's really secure and that they're really not going to fall out. Now I'm just going to go ahead and re-secure my gusset to the front of the bag and just continue sewing along that line where I left off from. Alright, I have finished sewing my gusset onto the front, and this is what it looks like. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the back. I'm just going to go ahead and lay my back piece right side up and then put the right sides together. And I just want to go ahead and line up the center. I still have my chalk mark from the pocket that I sewed in and the center sewn in line. So I'm just going to go ahead and line those up and then clip all the way around. Alright, and now I'm just going to go ahead and sew along this edge here. Okay, my exterior is pretty much almost done now. I just finished sewing along the gusset and back piece, and this is what it looks like when I turn it inside out. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside and now work on the flap. I started to play around with how I wanted the pieces of the suit to lay on the flap, and I came to the conclusion that the front jacket piece was a little too big for my liking. So I decided to go ahead and just whittle it down a little bit. It was pretty simple. I basically just turned the piece inside out and measured along the edge about 2 inches in. I made sure to pin everything together and turn it back inside out so I could see what it would look like. And I did like the amount that I took in, so I'm just going to go ahead and take that to my machine and just sew it down a little bit smaller. So now I'm just going to go ahead and cut off the excess fabric along the edge of this piece and just flip it back inside out, and kind of with the same thing as the flap, you're just going to have to push that corner out so that it looks nice. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and clip it down and press it with an iron so that it looks nice, like it did before. And now I just need to close up that opening on the side. I'm just going to go ahead and chalk out a straight line, press it with an iron, and then just sew along the edge. I'm going to leave the top open since I'm going to be sewing that to the top of the flap later. And now I'm finally ready to assemble the flap accessories. I just laid out the pieces over the flap how I wanted them to hang. I wanted the suit pieces to hang over the flaps, so I made sure that they were hanging about 2 to 3 inches over the bottom of the flap, and then I just pinned everything in place and sewed along the top. And now I'm just going to go ahead and trim the excess pieces that are on the top. I don't know why, but that just felt really satisfying, probably because the edges were so frayed and I finally got to trim it down to look nice. And now I'm going to go ahead and attach the flap to the exterior of my bag. I'm going to lay my bag down with the back part facing up and put the right sides of the bag and the flap together, making sure that the centers are lined up. And I'm just going to go ahead and clip everything in place and just sew along that top. And this is what the exterior of the bag is going to look like. It's really coming together, which is really exciting. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside and work on the interior divider, which also acts as a pocket. I'm going to go ahead and attach the zipper ends to the zipper first. All I did for the zipper ends is fold them in half and then again into quarters so that they fold into each other. The zipper that I got is a little bit longer than 15 inches, so I'm just going to go ahead and trim off the excess end with the zipper and then clip it together. For the other side of the zipper, it's pretty much the same thing, except I need to open up the zipper and measure it out. I need the zipper to be slightly smaller than the interior divider since I'm going to be sewing along the edge of the divider. So I made a marking of where I'm going to be sewing along the edge, then placed the zipper just inside of that marking and then pulled the zipper open, trimmed off the excess, and then clipped the zipper end onto the zipper and re-measured everything out before sewing both ends. I just did a straight stitch down here and here. So now that my zipper is completely assembled, this is what it'll look like when it's opened and closed. I now need to attach the zipper to the interior and exterior of my divider pocket. So I'm just going to take the exterior canvas piece and lay it right side up, and then I'm just going to go ahead and place the zipper right on top with the right side down, and then I'm going to place the interior piece right on top of that with the right side down. So then I'm just going to clip everything in place, all 3 layers, and make sure everything is all lined up before I stitch across. And this is what it'll look like after I'm done stitching. You'll see that if I go ahead and flip it over, one side of my pocket divider is now complete. And now I'm just going to go ahead and stitch across here so that everything stays nice and flat. And now I'm pretty much just going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to lay my interior pocket right side up, and then I'm just going to go ahead and lay the completed pocket on top of that with the right side up as well. And then I'm just going to lay the exterior piece right on top of that with the right side down. And again, I want to make sure that all 3 layers are all lined up before I start clipping. And then I'm just going to go ahead and sew across here. So now that I've sewn across the line, I'm just going to go ahead and open this up, and you should see that I have both sides of my divider pocket attached to the zipper. And now I'm just going to go ahead and stitch across here as well so that it'll lay nice and flat. Alright, so both sides of my divider piece are now secure to my zipper, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold it in half and start to assemble my divider piece. I'm just going to go ahead and fold up both sides and line them up as best as I can. I just put a few clips in here just to ensure that all 4 of the layers stay in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and attach the front and back gusset pieces to the divider pocket. So I'm just going to go ahead and line up the center of the gusset and the divider pocket first and work my way out. Basically just clipping everything in place. Then I'm basically going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to flip everything over and line up the center, and then just unclip and clip each clip one at a time as I add the other gusset. And I typically do this because I like to do minimum amounts of sewing. I just like to do 1 stitch through all of the layers. But if you want, you can always do 1 layer at a time. So you can always do the divider pocket first, sew that all together, then do the front gusset, sew it together, and then do the back gusset and sew that together as well. I just like to do this way just because you have to do 1 line of stitching between all of the different layers. Alright, so this is what everything looks like after being sewn together. You can see that I got a little bit of wrinkle in the corners, but you won't be able to tell once I assemble the bag. So you can just kind of ignore that part. But I'm going to go ahead and set that aside and work on the internal pocket on the back side of the bag now. The first thing I'm going to do is measure 1 inch down from the top of the pocket. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a straight line across. I'm also going to create a center point, and then I'm going to go ahead and make another line across from the top of the first one, and this is going to be 3/4 of an inch underneath the line that I just drew. And then for the next part, you can go ahead and make your zipper as wide as you want. I'm going to go ahead and mark it 8 inches across. So I'm just going to take that center point and do 4 inches one way and 4 inches the other way. So basically I have a 8 inch wide by 3/4 of an inch rectangle that is centered and sitting about 1 inch from the top of the pocket. And then I'm going to go ahead and take the back piece where the pocket is going to be attached to, and I'm going to go ahead and make a center mark. And I'm just going to go ahead and line up those centers, and I'm going to put the rectangle pocket piece about 1.5 inches from the top of the back piece, and make sure that everything is just lined up and centered. And then I'm just going to go ahead and just pin those 2 pieces of fabric together just so they stay secure. And I'm just going to take this to the machine, and I'm just going to sew along this rectangle marking, just making sure that I anchor in those corners nice and tight so that they stay together. Okay, so this is going to be a little difficult to see just because my fabric is black and my stitching is also black, but I do have a rectangle sewn on there. And now I'm just going to go ahead and find a middle point inside of the rectangle and just mark the center and just draw a straight line all the way across. And then I'm just going to go ahead and create a Y shape on either side of the rectangle. So you'll see here that I have a sideways Y on each side of the rectangle. And then using a seam ripper, I'm just going to carefully cut out a small hole along that center line. Just enough until I can get my scissors through, and then I'll use my scissors to cut out a straight line and the points of that Y shape. And when you go into the corner, you just want to be really careful that you don't cut through that corner of that sewn rectangle area. Okay, so this part's gonna be a little weird, but you're just gonna go ahead and push the pocket piece through that slit all the way through the top, bottom, and the sides, and then just flatten it out as best as you can. And I'm just kind of using my fingers here to flatten out the folds and just kind of tighten that crease, making sure that everything is nice and straight. And then I'm gonna go ahead and place the wrong side of the back pocket over the zipper. And I'm just gonna go ahead and pin the zipper in place. And you can see here that my zipper is a little bit longer than the rectangle hole, so I'm just gonna go ahead and trim it down just a little bit. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and sew a rectangle around this box to secure the zipper to the interior back piece. All right, so now that my zipper is secure, you can see here that I trimmed down the excess zipper. And I'm just gonna go ahead and attach the back pocket piece to the front of the pocket. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay it right side on top and clip it all the way around. And for the bottom of the pocket, you're just gonna go ahead and not sew it shut, because that's where we're actually gonna be inverting the bag through the pocket. So I'm just gonna go ahead and fold it over and just clip the sides. And when I go ahead and sew around the pocket, I'm just gonna make sure that I leave most of this bottom unsewn. So I'm just gonna start here and go all the way around and end here and just leave this part open, and we will close that up later. For this part, just make sure that you leave the back of the bag folded over so that you don't accidentally sew it. I'm just gonna go ahead and just fold it over while I sew around the pocket so I don't accidentally sew these two parts together. Okay, so my pocket is now assembled except for the bottom part. I'm just gonna go ahead and set that aside and work on the exterior zipper that will keep my bag closed. So basically, I pressed the ends of the tabs already for my zipper. What I did was I basically just folded over each side twice so that when I fold everything into the zipper, the seams just look really nice and clean. I'm going to go ahead and do that for both sides, and I'm just going to measure out how long the zipper should be so that I can trim it down on both sides as well. I basically just want the zipper to be a little bit longer than the front and back pieces. My zipper, you can see here, is much longer, so I'm just going to trim that down first. And then I'm going to go ahead and slide my zipper into the end piece and clip it down before I sew. And I'm just going to go ahead and sew here, here, and here on both sides of the zipper. And just make sure that you're careful when you're sewing through the zipper. It is plastic, but you just want to be careful with your needle. And this is what my zipper looks like after the ends are attached. And now I'm just going to go ahead and prepare the pieces that are going to go on either side of the zipper. I'm just clipping each side first so that I can just go ahead and sew the seams down. I basically just measure these out to be the same length as the front and back of the bag pieces. So now that these are sewn, I'm going to go ahead and just assemble. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the exterior piece and lay it wrong side up and put that right on top of my zipper that is facing right side up. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple clips in place to just help hold these two pieces together. And then I'm going to go ahead and flip that over and take the interior piece and lay it right side down and clip everything carefully so that all three layers are nice and lined up before I just sew across all three layers. All right, so now I just have to flip the two pieces inside out, and you'll see that one side of my zipper is complete. I'm just going to go ahead and press them down and just pin them together so that I can do a top stitch across just to secure the two pieces onto my zipper and that it'll lay nice and flat. So I'll just go ahead and do a top stitch across here. And now I'm going to basically just do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and take my exterior piece and lay it right side down on top of the right side of the zipper. And I'm just going to go take that and leave that on top of the interior piece, which is laying right side up. And I just want to make sure that everything is lined before you clip everything together. And then again, I'm just going to go ahead and do a straight stitch across all 3 layers. And again, basically the same thing as before. I'm just going to go ahead and flip these over inside out and just kind of press them together with my fingers as I clip and pin them down. And then I'll go ahead and just do a top stitch right across here. Alright, so my zipper is complete and ready to be attached. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it aside. And now I'm going to work on the pocket divider and gusset and attach them to the front and back of my bag. We made the gusset pretty wide since we were attaching like 2 separate gusset pieces together. So at this point, if you want to go ahead and trim it down a little bit, you can, depending on how big you want each side to be. And then depending on which side you want your zipper to start from, you want to figure out where to put the front and where to put the back. So I wanted my zipper to open from left to right. So I'm going to make sure that the front is on the top and that the back piece is on the back while I'm sewing it to my gusset. So similar to what I did on the exterior part of the bag, we're just going to go ahead and find the center of the gusset, and I'm just going to go ahead and attach the front side first. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay the front piece on top of the gusset with the right side down and just clip all the way around, making sure that the center is aligned, and I'm just going to work my way out. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew all the way around and just making sure that I'm kind of careful around those corner areas. All right, now that my front is sewn onto the gusset, I'm just going to go ahead and sew the back piece onto the gusset as well. So just flipping it around, I'm going to make sure that my center pieces are aligned and that the right side of the back piece is facing down. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and clip from the center and work my way outwards. And then just go ahead and sew around the gusset, being again very careful with the corner areas. Okay, so my interior piece of my bag is finally coming together. And I did forget to film this part, but I did go ahead and trim the excess gusset on both sides of the bag. So that side that was just kind of hanging over, I just went ahead and trimmed it across. And now I'm going to go ahead and attach the zipper to the interior bag. So again, depending on which way you want your zipper to open and close, make sure that you have it oriented in the right direction. And I'm just going to go ahead and clip my zipper to the bag so that the right side of the zipper is up and the wrong side of the zipper should be clipped to the interior of the bag. Making sure that everything's centered, and I'm just going to go ahead and clip both sides. And then sew both sides as well. Alright, so this is what my bag looks like with the zipper attached. It's really coming along, so it's really exciting for me. And now I'm just going to go ahead and stuff the interior bag to the exterior bag, and I'm just going to stuff it with some of this leftover suit that I had just to give it a little bit of a better shape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and attach one of the clasp pieces, and I just kind of want to know where that flap is going to end up when I close the bag. So just kind of making sure that it's full, not too full, but kind of just full enough where it's has a little bit of like that bag shape that I want. And I'm just going to go ahead and make some markings with a piece of chalk just kind of eyeballing it for now, and then once I have a general idea of what I want, I'll go ahead and remove everything and just kind of make sure everything is centered and use a ruler to measure out the center of where the clasp should go. And then before I attach the clasp, I'm just making 2 very small slits with my seam ripper. And then I'm just going to attach the clasp onto the exterior part of the bag. Alright, so this part is going to be a little bit weird, but you're just going to go ahead and stuff the exterior part of your bag into the interior part. And then we're going to invert everything from this pocket. So I'm just going to go ahead and tuck everything in nicely. And you're just going to want to make sure that the interior pocket zipper is open all the way, just to make it easier when you flip everything inside out. And you're just going to go ahead and stuff the exterior piece between the divider pocket and the back of your bag. You want to make sure that the flap of the bag is towards the back of the bag and the front of the bag is towards the divider pocket. And you just want to make sure that all of your zipper tabs are nicely tucked in there. You also want to make sure that your straps are nicely tucked inside as well. Once everything is nicely aligned, you're just going to go ahead and clip everything in place all the way around. I just kind of made sure that the corners were lined up and that everything was centered before I started clipping. And now you're just going to go ahead and sew all the way around this top portion here. Just be careful with this part. You're sewing through multiple layers. My needle actually broke while I was doing this and I had to replace it. Alright, so now that I've sewn all the way around the top of my bag, I'm just going to go ahead and flip everything through this little pocket. Just go really slow, pulling a little bit at a time. You'll be amazed by the magic that happens during this process. I was really surprised when I learned about how to do this, and as I was doing it, I still couldn't believe that I was pulling an entire bag through this tiny pocket. So this is really cool. Once you have everything turned inside out, this is what your bag will look like. So now I'm just going to go ahead and do a top stitch across the top. You don't actually have to do this part if you don't want to, but I do like how it anchors down the zipper a little bit better. Your zipper will just lay a little bit flatter and look a little nicer if you do this part. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold down the zipper and clip all the way around the sides and the front. For the back part, since the flap is kind of in the way, you can't really clip it. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin the zipper in place. And then I'm just going to do a top stitch all along the top. For the back section, I'm actually going to top stitch with the top facing upward. So I am going to be sewing in a little bit blind. Just make sure that you have your everything is lined up in place. You know, use your fingers to kind of feel where the zipper is, and just sew across that back section slowly and carefully. And then for the sides and the front, I'll just do a normal top stitch. All right, and this is what your bag will look like if you choose to do the top stitch all the way around. And now I'm going to go ahead and add our strap. So I have about 2 yards of webbing here, and I'm just going to use my birthday candle again to seal both edges. I'm going to go ahead and insert it into my tri-glide slider. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide one side over from the bottom and loop around to the top and go down. And then I'm just going to go ahead and fold the end over once. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of fabric glue and clip it down and wait for it to dry. And again, if you have some sort of pattern on your webbing like I do, just make sure that orientation is going in the direction that you want it to go in. And now that everything is dry, I'm just going to go ahead and stitch a box around here just to really anchor everything in place. Alright, so my Tri-Glide slider is in place, and I'm just going to go ahead and attach the strap to my bag. So I'm just going to loop it through one side and just make sure that the webbing is straight and nothing is twisted around. And then I'm going to go ahead and insert it underneath the Tri-Glide slider first, come over the top, and then just pull it through. And then I'll go ahead and loop it to the other side of the rectangle ring. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of fabric glue, fold it over once, add a little bit more fabric glue, and then fold it over one more time. And then I'll clip everything in place and wait for this to dry as well. So now that my glue is dry, you do have a few options. You can go ahead and just stitch another square to hold the webbing in place, or you can go ahead and attach Chicago screws like I'm going to do, or you can just do both to really secure that webbing in place. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure out where I want the Chicago screws to sit. You can have them as close together as you want or as far apart as you want. I'm just going to go ahead and use a piece of chalk to mark where I want them. And then I used my leather hole puncher to punch 2 holes. You can see here that I really had to use a lot of leverage to get the hole puncher through the 3 layers of webbing. I thought I was going to break my table at one point, so just be really careful when you're doing this part. I also have a pair of tiny scissors that I use to just kind of clean up the frayed areas in the hole. And then I went ahead and attached the Chicago screws, added a tiny drop of super glue before screwing them together, just so that they'll really be secure and stay in place. And now I'm going to go ahead and attach the second part of our clasp. So just like I did before, I'm going to stuff the bag a little bit. Not overstuffing it, but just making sure that it has a little bit of shape. I basically just used that leftover suit again. And then I kind of eyeballed where the piece should go. I just made a few markings and made sure it was centered. And then I unscrewed the clasp piece and marked the center rectangle as best as I could. Then I used a seam ripper to make a small hole, and then I used a pair of scissors to cut out the rectangle. Just be really careful with this part. You can always make the rectangle bigger, but you definitely cannot make it smaller. So I would just start with a smaller rectangle than you think, and then widen it as needed. Then I basically just screwed the clasp pieces together. And you can just use a little bit of glue here if you want to, if you really want to secure it in place. And now the bag has a clasp closure attached to it. Alright, so we just need to do one more thing now. We need to close up the inner pocket where we flip the bag out from. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull out the pocket first, and make sure you pull out those corners really well. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my machine to close up the pocket, but if you want to, you can go ahead and hand stitch it so that you can't see the seams. Since this is going to be on the inside, I don't care too much. I'm just going to go ahead and clip across here and then sew across here. And once you're done sewing, you're just going to go ahead and tuck the pocket back in. Just make sure that you tuck those corners in really nicely again so that the pocket is nice and squared up. And that's pretty much it. I turned this $15 secondhand suit into this messenger bag. I absolutely love this bag. I carried it around when I visited Chicago, and I loved how roomy it was, and all the pockets came in handy. I just love how unique it looks. Let me know if you'll try making your own.